I think Legislative Counsel is important because we provide a service for Oregonians really in helping to do the work that they don't see.
You know, they have an idea of what we do and they really only see the front desk. They see our attorneys go out and testify in committee, but they really don't see our entire office, and most people are really surprised at how large our office is when they come to visit.
People just think the work shows up, and actually this team of 50 people here in Legislative Counsel are the ones that are really the backbone, and they're behind all of it.
I think a lot of people assume that stuff that actually has to be done by a human being is done by the computer automatically, and it really involves a lot much more labor. It's more labor intensive than I think a lot of people realize.
We have a whole editing process that takes some time, and we do that to every one-sentence amendment.
The legislature is in the business of creating laws, and that is not done in a vacuum.
It's just an incredible process, I think, to ensure that when the laws finally get passed and get enacted, that they're solid, that they're well drafted, that they're consistent with our other laws, that they're consistent with the state and federal constitutions.
Before I came here, I worked as a litigator for about 7 years. A lot of it was administrative law. It's interpreting statutes, interpreting rules, arguing over all the ambiguities in them. To the extent that those ambiguities don't exist, that all relevant parties understand what the law is, how to comply, the system functions much better, and it gets rid of a lot of wasted energy and a lot of confusion.
It's a very exciting experience to work with legislators and stakeholders during session. There's always a lot of energy in the building that can be really exciting and also stressful at times. But you understand that at the end of it, we all have common goals of doing the best work for the public, and so even that stress can be exciting in a way.
You never know what each day brings. It's one of the interesting things about this job is that every day is different, sometimes vastly so.
I actually enjoy session. I like the hubbub of people in the building and things going on.
It can get really busy and hectic. It's fast-paced, the phones are ringing, people are coming in, a lot happening within the building as well as within our office.
The legislature they are very demanding. They ask an awful lot of us, and frequently with extremely short turnaround times and often with inadequate information. So there's a lot of chaos and confusion and things going on at the same time.
You spend the day just doing drafting, talking to the members, talking to lobbyists, talking to the editors and publications, and making sure that the work of the legislature gets done.
We see people from the desks every day during session. Because we produce the bills that they need to be first read up in the chambers. There's people here till 10 or 11 o'clock at night, anywhere from attorneys writing the laws to the publication specialists putting them in the system and the editors staying to make sure they're right. And then there's been times where it's very late into the evening that we send it to state printing, and Legislative Counsel is a huge part of the legislative process to get everything to the legislators so that they can run their sessions smoothly.
There can be a lot of pressure during session to provide very, very quick responses, and that is kind of a double-edged sword. On the one side, it's very important to work quickly so that the inner workings of the legislative session can happen quickly, and that is an important goal of our office. But another equally, if not more important goal is to provide sound legal advice.
When we come with integrity, when we're able to ask the right questions in a way that is clearly not critical of the ideas, but just trying to flesh them out and make sure we understand all of what it takes to make them work reasonably well, I think there's value. That's when we add value.
Certainly legislators who have been here for a long time have a really good grasp of what we do, because they are very aware that some of the constituents that they talk to and some of the ideas that they are passing to us can be kind of cloudy and unformed in many cases, and that the process of working with Legislative Counsel is really the process of shaping those ideas and getting them into a form that can actually be enacted as law.
I think it's important to know that we're always available for questions. So if there's something that confuses you about the product that you receive, I would welcome questions, because there could be something that I missed that could be remedied if you ask me why I did what I did.
If I were a legislator, I would find it very, very helpful to be able to come to an office that is able to look back over what has happened over the years, what have we done in the past, what mistakes have we made, how can we do things differently, or go back to something that we've done in the past to make things better. And I think that institutional memory is really important.
I love just the mental exercise of researching it, seeing if it's already covered in state law, see if there are any legal opinions that have been issued on it, read the state and federal regulations around it, finally figuring out what needs to be changed in Oregon law, and then writing that law or amending that law, and then the process of, okay, now how do I incorporate that into all the statutes, and what's the ripple effect? It's it's like putting a puzzle together.
The best way that legislators and other clients can get the best service from us is by, it's somewhat counterintuitive, but explaining in ordinary language what the problem is that they're trying to solve and what their solution is. The temptation out there is to come up with proposed statutory language before giving it to our office, and that hamstrings us, because when we receive mock statutory language, we frequently modify the language because it's our conclusion that putting the precise words a different way will more effectively achieve what is wanted.
What I'm looking for always is good communication, an opportunity to understand what the problem is, what the solution is in plain words, and then to let me focus on putting those words into the legal terms that fit within the statutory schemes that exist.
When people are making requests of our office, it's important to keep in mind that even if the concept has been vetted through a number of stakeholders and interests prior to coming to our office, the terms of art that are used by stakeholders in a particular subject area may be different than the terms of art that are used in Oregon's specific statutory law.
In terms of this political process, in our office, the lawyers are the ones who meet members. It's the lawyers who meet the lobbyists, and we are the faces of our bills. I would not want to try to draft bills without having pub services.
The publication services people are kind of the heart and soul of this. They're the ones who really polish the flawed gems that we turn out in our end of the office and really make them work in many cases.
Our responsibility as editors is to be certain that documents are consistent with the form and style guidelines that have been adopted by the Legislative Assembly by rule. We're also interested, of course, in correcting mistakes in grammar and spelling, syntax, that kind of thing. But I really think the value we add to documents is reading for sense.
Publication Services has three major responsibilities. The first is to prepare drafts and draft amendments, and in that capacity we're providing direct services to our members. The second is to print measures in three formats: engrossings, enrollings, and of course introduced measures. In that capacity we are providing direct services to the House and Senate desks. The third is to compile and publish a variety of post-session publications, including ORS and Oregon laws and the criminal code. In that sense, we're providing direct services to the public. In an average session and the short session that follows, we'll do approximately 16,000 work orders, which means we'll have approximately 16,000 deadlines.
Editors can do so many different kinds of documents. We can work on new drafts that will be introduced. We can work on amendments. We can introduce bills. We can work on engrossings and enrollings and conflicts.
We do a lot of kind of quality control things as simple as like sequence, making sure the subunits and paragraphs, everything is numbered and lettered in the correct order, to like larger sense issues where sort of a layperson check on the content and the sense of the draft.
So when we read something, it needs to be understandable to us. If it's understandable to us, hopefully it's understandable to anyone else who has to read the legislation.
They're often very, very good at pointing out logical fallacies or other things that we haven't considered properly, fleshed out ideas that are only sketchy in the initial draft. So working back and forth with publication services is often a very valuable way to try and make sure the legislation is more refined and polished.
Unfortunately for the editors, if we're doing our jobs correctly, we should be invisible. People shouldn't pick up a bill and say, didn't anybody edit this? They should pick up a bill and say, oh, I understand that, and not give it another thought.
For every odd numbered year session, we actually compile all of the statutes that have been amended in the previous session and produce a new set of ORS, Oregon Revised Statutes, the 21 volumes.
The books that we're publishing are the definitive resource for pretty much lawyers across the entire state as to what the Oregon law is.
When we come to publishing, the entire state relies on the accuracy and timeliness of our work.
I think it's really important that we explain everything. You know, if there's different versions of different statutes that come into play at different times, we need to be really careful as to how we're publishing those and that it's as clear as possible so that any person, not just a lawyer, but just a lay person, can come and open up, an ORS volume and figure out what is the law now. If the law just recently changed, what was the law right up until the recent change? What's the law going to change to in the future?
I hope there's a good understanding that what we try to do is nonpartisan, and that we're simply attempting to make all of the documents that we produce as good as possible.
This concept of being nonpartisan and impartial is really a foundational element to our office, and I think the legislature both values and finds it very useful to have that perspective.
If you're able to look at things from a completely objective point of view, you're able to ask a lot of questions that you otherwise may not have asked if you had allowed your own personal political beliefs to flow into your work.
That's one of the great things about our office. We don't have to take sides. We don't shape policy. We just want to make sure that the ideas that are presented as well and as clearly as possible, and if they become law, that they can be implemented as easily as possible by agencies, by people who have to enforce the new rules.
I love the Office of Legislative Counsel. It's a great place to work.
My colleagues in this office are wonderful. They're articulate, they all have a good sense of humor, they're pleasant to be with. They come from a variety of backgrounds, and I think they're very skilled at what they do.
It's very important that legislators have faith and confidence in the advice that we provide, and we would never be able to produce the work that we do, particularly at the high level that we do, without great cooperation among all of the folks here.
I think the citizens of Oregon are better off for the work of our office.
The work we do here is important because everybody in the state uses it. Whether you rent an apartment or own a home, if you drive down the street, if you walk down the street, the laws that govern all of us affect all of that.
It is a rare and marvelous thing to work in a law office where you're guaranteed that for a certain amount of time every year you are going to grapple with legal issues that you've never seen before, and you are always going to get to be at the forefront of the law.